Okay, we're all here today to talk about reality television and how it's changed throughout the years in American culture and how American culture has changed reality television, all in honor of the first reality TV series, An American Family.
If you look at An American Family, and I'll bring it back to that just as an example of something earlier that's mutated into what we have now. I was surprised when I'm watching this thing that I see 1 minute and 30 seconds of Pat Loud playing the piano, and I have no idea why she's doing it. That we're just there sort of watching this thing happen, and you're like, well, that's an interesting little slice of something. But what ends up happening is as reality shows have gone on and as networks have become more and more cost conscious, and they are turning to reality television because it's less expensive to produce in most cases. You end up, when you talk about having 100 hours of something shot for everything that's on television, I think the more that you shoot, the more likely you are to get natural interaction in some cases. Very early on, I worked on a show for MTV that shot an absolutely ungodly amount of footage for every show that was boiled down out of it. But we don't have the luxury of knowing what's going to happen, and you do have to have a story arc. Something has to be happening, and if it happens over the course of 4 or 5 days, I can't make you sit in front of your television for 4 or 5 days.
From my own personal experience on Survivor as one of the contestants, the invisible hand of the producers is very much alive out there, and Mark Burnett ran a really tight ship. I mean, there was very little influence of the producers on us survivors when we're out there. We originally got on, he said, treat them like trees, as if they're non-existent. But then that started to feel a little bit artificial because you have all these extra people. You guy with the sound mic, boom over your head, a cameraman in your face. 3 days of filming for 1 hour of episode for 16 different contestants. So basically through the creative editing process, the writers can really put words in your mouth just by editing, even something as subtle as a grimace of your face. Like, I might have grimaced at a caterpillar crossing, but then they could just edit it that, Richard or one of the other contestants says something, then they flash my face grimacing, like I'm discontent. And 90 or 80 or 90% of the sound bites that you actually hear, at least on my episode of Survivor, are producer driven, meaning that, about 10 to 20% were us on the beach spontaneously interacting. But then when something evolved, the producers would take me or one of the other contestants, stick us in the jungle, put a camera in our face, and say, so what's going on with you and Sue? And I would say, I don't think anything's going on with me and Sue. I think everything's fine. But then you start to wonder, well, maybe there is something going on with me and Sue. So they generate these sound bites by actually sticking you in there and say, tell me what you're thinking about Richard right now, or tell me what you think about this contestant. So all those sound bites are very much driven by the producers, suggested by the producers. They're your own words, but again, 3 days condensed into 1 hour of time, they can make anybody really look like anything. And that's where the story arc comes in. It really does.
And in terms of the invisible hand of the producer, I often consider that sort of a fundamental deception of the reality genre, in that the average viewer will say, and I've talked to thousands and thousands of students over the last few years doing workshops in media literacy, lectures and such, and most people don't understand that reality TV employs writers. Most don't understand that, for every 1 hour of The Bachelor that you're seeing on TV, they've shot more than 100 hours of tape. They don't understand, they will believe that producers can't put words in people's mouths, and that's true, but they don't understand what a Frankenbite is.
I want to get to Troy, just because Jennifer touched upon a little bit. Are these shows, for the most part, and we'll get to the positive ones soon, but are they exploitative of real people? Are we sacrificing some real major issues here for the sake of entertainment?
I think that stating that as a blanket over reality television would be incorrect. I know that if you look through my history, obviously, Jennifer, you're going to see The Bachelor on there. That I had worked on that show for a period of time, so I won't be talking about it. Not every show is done that way. I've been very careful. If you look at the things that I've done at my history, you can avoid doing prank shows. You can avoid doing mean-spirited stuff. It really depends on the spirit of the material.
There's a wide variety of different kinds of shows, but in terms of your question, Sean, about whether reality TV in general, not necessarily in its entirety, but in general, has been exploitative, I would say yes. It's a vision of America in which women don't achieve, things just happen to them, and the only way they can become powerful is as arm candy by proxy to rich husbands. And in which women and men of all ages and races are basically portrayed as being unhappy and unsuccessful unless they have a wide range of brand name product placement things. We can't have clothes anymore. We have to have couture. We can't have a couch anymore. We need an $8,000 designer, piece of furniture that you'd seen in Extreme Makeover Home Edition. And it's basically, the problem becomes that if you didn't know anything about America other than what you saw on reality TV, you'd think the women's rights movement, the civil rights movement never even happened.
Overall, I think the experience was a lot more positive than negative in my life.
Right.
But at the same time, I think a lot of people don't realize what they're signing up for when they actually do sign up for it, because it's going to be there forever. And to this day, people still remember me from that show. They took my vote for Richard at the end very, very personally. So it's amazing how that is.
I think the single most exploitative reality show of 10 years that I've monitored was the Toddlers and Tiaras show, where the kids are, in addition to being on screen more than they should, and in addition to being manipulated and edited and, to look like brats and all of that, they're also hyper-sexualized. So you have episodes that are, a totally normal episode of Toddlers and Tiaras would have a 5-year-old doing a mock striptease, basically Dallas Cowboy cheerleader kind of dance number in hot short shorts and a halter top and fringed tassels and etc. to club music, and having judges say, in the bathing suit contest, we do allow bikinis for the 5-year-olds, but we don't allow thongs because, it's really hard to pull off a great body in a thong. Not because it's inappropriate to show a 4 and 5-year-old on national TV in a thong. I do think, Sean, you raise a really good question about exploitativeness when children are concerned. It's not to say, though, that there are no positive reality shows.
Right.
Look, Margaret Cho had a really fun reality show in the sitcom style. It dealt with race, gender, class, aging, beauty, all sorts of issues, but in a non-exploitative way, just, culling those for humor, the way she does in her stand-up.
Where do you think reality TV's shows or programs are going in the future? They're clearly here to stay. So where do you think reality TV is going in the future? Troy, let's start with you.
I think where it's going in the future is the novelty has worn off, and we're going to start watching for quality in the programs, because we are slowly developing an understanding of what those shows are, the language of them, how they're made. I think people are going to be less tolerant with shows that are hyper manipulated, because people are getting more media literate every day, partially from their own judgment, and partially from, I refer to Jen a lot, but it's one of those things where media literacy, people weren't talking about a lot of these things 10 years ago. So we're waking up as consumers and viewers to what it is we will and won't stand for. And ultimately, no matter how cheap a show is to make, if it's consistently pulling, terrible numbers, it's going to go off the air. People are going to stop watching it.
But I don't think it's naturally going to go there unless we really demand it, and not through the passive supply and demand myth, but through actively raising our voice.